Cool. Well, looks like we've got people hopping on. Hi, Arlette. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen with you all, and then we'll do some introductions. Let's see. So you all can see that? Yep. Okay, great. So welcome to Bonner Program Management slash Staffing Your Bonner Program session. For those who don't know me, if we haven't met yet, I haven't been able to join a ton of the sessions so far, so maybe you haven't met me yet, but my name is Liz Brandt, and I'm the Community Engagement Director at the Bonner Foundation. And I have a bit of a history with Bonner. I was a student in the program, Bonner alum, scholar from Center College, which is in Danville, Kentucky. And then I did some organizing work after I left, and then returned to my alma mater, to Center, to run the Bonner program there as the Bonner coordinator for 2 years, and then transitioned into this role in at the foundation. So I've been a student in the program. I was also a student leader. I was a senior intern, a Bonner leadership team member, Bonner Congress rep, and then ran the program as a staff member, and then now at the foundation. So just a little bit about me. So hopefully some of my experience will be helpful in terms of staffing your Bonner program, because I have been a staff member on a Bonner program before. And then we have a fantastic guest speaker and dear friend of mine, Amber from Stetson University. So I'll let her introduce herself as well.
Hey guys, my name's Amber. I think I've met several of you, but not everybody. So I'm still fingers crossed, like radically optimistic that we may have an in-person fall directors, even if that's in vain. My experience with Bonner started similar to Liz, where I was a Bonner Scholar at Stetson, which is one of 3 hybrid schools in the network. Similarly to Center. I was a Bonner lead team member. I was a senior intern, and then I stayed to work in our center for 2 years after graduation as an AmeriCorps Vista, where I worked with a lot of our community partnerships, developed some structure for better supporting our partners, and managed Bonner's internships. And then for the past 2 years, I've been the Bonner coordinator at Stetson. So I've seen our program through a lot of different changes, which, certainly schools have lots of different models, and we're going to talk about a lot of those today. And I have found that even within one program, your school may go through many different changes, and your students may want to try lots of different approaches. So I hope that I can share some valuable tidbits with all of you.
Yes, thank you, Amber. She was gracious enough to join us. She has so much experience being a Vista, being a student in the program, now running the program at Stetson. So we knew she'd be able to provide some valuable insight and experience from the campus perspective. So we will, let's see how we do this. There we go. Okay, so today what we're going to cover in this next hour and a half are Bonner program staffing standards. There aren't many of them, but we'll cover what there is. And then we will talk a bit about staff roles and responsibilities. So essentially the program management, how you manage a Bonner program. Then we'll talk about student roles. So BLT, Bonner Leadership Team. I'm not sure if you've heard that acronym yet, but that's what that stands for, BLT. And then senior interns and Congress rep, which you heard Amber and I both reference so far. So we really do see students, and they can be an extension of your staff. So the student roles is really an important piece, particularly if you have limited funds and a smaller staff. Students can be such an asset to help be an extension of your staff. So we'll talk a bit about that and what that can look like. And then we'll look at some examples of what a campus-wide center for civic engagement or office can look like, and those and some organizational charts. I'll show you some different examples at different sizes. So a smaller one, a medium-sized one, and a large one, and look at those. So that's what we're gonna cover today. Oh, look at that fancy. Wow, I don't think I've put the fancy transitions, but that's nice. Okay, so we're just gonna start off with an exercise. So we're gonna take a couple minutes and have you, hopefully you maybe have a piece of paper around you, can maybe actually physically draw this. If not, maybe you can type it and write it out or something. But just think a little about like your current staffing and structure, and like map it out. And then reflect a little bit on what is the story of your work and how you got here. So we're gonna have you do that for a couple minutes, and then we'll put you into some breakout rooms so you can share a little bit about those too. Okay. Here we go. All right, awesome. So hopefully those were good conversations. You got to hear about how other institutions are structured and staffed, and hear a little bit about other people's personal narrative about how they got into this work. And so yeah, we'll carry that through with us. And then we'll loop back to this last question at the end. What infrastructure must you build? So you can be thinking and reflecting on that when you hear this information today, in terms of like new ideas, ways of, models, ways of structuring this, your center and the staff and your students. You can be thinking about what maybe you want to build into your system. So we will keep going here. Okay, so first up, we've got Bonner Program Staffing Standards. So the first bullet here mostly applies to Bonner Scholar schools. I'm not sure how much you all have gotten so far about the difference between scholars and leaders, scholar and leader programs, but essentially scholar programs have an endowment from the foundation. And in that endowment agreement, there is a specific standard that says that for every 40 students, for every 40 Bonner students, there should be at least one full-time staff member. So if there's 80 students, 2 full-time staff members. And so that's explicitly in the Bonner Scholar Endowment Agreement. But we encourage Bonner Leader programs to follow that same model because we do see that that works pretty well. In terms of during your startup phase, which I know quite a few of you all are in, so considering starting up the Bonner program, it's good to clarify roles of staff. So what are going to be those roles and responsibilities of different staff, and to appoint a director, someone who's going to really oversee the whole program and the work. And typically the Bonner director reports to some sort of senior administrator. So for example, at my alma mater, when at Center College, when I was as the Bonner coordinator there, our Bonner director, our Bonner program was housed under student life. So our Bonner director reported directly to our dean of student life. So that's typically what you want to see. And then also it's a good idea to be kind of creative about leveraging other available funds and staffing to staff your center. So things like work study, having work study students help to run your center, vistas, and graduate assistants. So I'm going to ask Amber to share a little bit about, since she was a Vista at Stetson, kind of how that worked.
Yeah, so we still have 2 AmeriCorps Vistas, which were previously funded by our state campus compact, which has since the pandemic has started, has dissolved, but that program will continue. So previously, when I was recruited to be a Vista, we really used those positions as staff in the center, which is not how they're meant to be used. So I don't recommend it, but it is helpful to think about ways that a Vista's project could align with Bonner. And so at minimum, we use Vistas usually every year to be the staff member who has one-on-ones with the sophomore class. We try really hard to follow that foundation expectation of having once a semester staff one-on-ones with all of our students in a cohort. So we usually will ask one of our Vistas to fill in that role for sophomores. Another thing that we've started doing is, since in the past 2 years, we've started using Vistas for what they're actually meant to be used for, which are those collaborative community-driven projects. I apologize if you guys hear any background noise. I'm on my front porch and there's cars. So currently we have 2 AmeriCorps Vistas who work full-time, 20 hours a week with a local community center in a low-income neighborhood, and 20 hours a week on our campus doing economic development work. And so at their center, which is one of our largest Bonner sites, they will be the site supervisors for some of our Bonner students and are serving as kind of special advisors to our economic development issue area group, where students go through monthly trainings with other students in site positions related to economic development. So those are some of the ways that we incorporate AmeriCorps into our staffing. And then we also have CCE staff employees who might be supervised by those people, or student employees, I should say, who also will sometimes have a little bit of a capacity building role within Bonner, or will at least work on center committees alongside other Bonner students.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing, Amber. Awesome. Okay, so we'll keep going here. So this just is to point you to the Bonner Wiki page that has more information on Bonner program staffing. Okay, so that's pretty much it for staffing standards, but now we're gonna dive into what Bonner staff do. So I believe you all saw this quote at the outset of this meeting, and it is one that I think really does encompass quite well what Bonner staff do. Let's see, I apologize because I was going to read it to you all, but my little photos here of everybody is blocking the full quote, but so I guess I won't read it to you, but essentially it encompasses Bonner program directors, coordinators, staff do a little bit of everything, right? They're political strategists, communicators, counselors, interpreters, planners, problem solvers. And this was from a report in 1992, and I would say that this hasn't changed much. This is still very true for what Bonner staff do is really a little bit of everything. I know some of these aspects surprised me even when I became in a staff role, that I didn't realize how much of like counseling I would be doing with students coming to me, and they have lives and things going on in their lives and like needed like heart-to-heart kind of counseling work, and I wasn't necessarily prepared to do that, right? So I think it's important to know at the outset all of the different aspects that really go into being a staff member, and that it encompasses a lot. But it's also very rewarding to do all of these aspects. So what Bonner staff do. So this is just kind of an overview, top level of what Bonner staff do. So develop and manage partnerships, positions, and projects. So working in the community with the community to develop these partnerships and projects to do real work in the community. Teaching, advising, coaching, and mentor for students and for maybe fellow staff members. Empowering students and staff through their development and through their leadership. Managing and holding people accountable, building and implementing expanding programs in your center, and building connections both on campus and off campus, building pathways, whether that's academic and collaborations in the community and with your campus. So that's like big picture kind of what Bonner staff do. Things you do every term. So students are engaging in communities, and that can be reflected in the positions, the community learning agreements, in person and now online, and then also on BWebers. I think you'll get the BWebers session next, so you'll hear much more about BWebers, our friend BWebers. Education, training, and reflection. So these are all of the content, the meetings that students are getting, the class meetings, site meetings, all Bonner meetings. And the goal really here is to be having really one of these a week at least. So maybe it's an all Bonner meeting one week, the next week you have a class meeting, the next week it's a site meeting, but every week students are engaging in this reflection and training and education. advising the one-on-one meetings. Amber just referenced this as well. So between either a Bonner and a staff member, or a Bonner and a faculty advisor, and ideally doing these at least once a semester. I really do think these one-on-one meetings are really important, not only for the student, but also for the staff member, to get time with individual students that sometimes you get lost. Some students kind of get lost in the mix. And so it's good to make sure you have that one-on-one time with every student at some point. And you may split that up between, the coordinator does does the first years and the sophomores, and your director does juniors and seniors. There's ways of splitting it up, particularly if you have large programs. At Center, we had 60 students. So one staff member doing 60 one-on-ones would be a lot. So we split them up, which 30 was still a lot, but we made do over the course of a semester. It's pretty doable. And then leading and managing. So building and implementing the program, projects, events, and all of the operations of your center. So you're doing these things every term, and engaging year-round in all of these aspects of the work. So I'm not going to read every little tiny bullet on this page, but this is a screenshot from the training handbook that it should be at least on the Bonner Learning community. And so you'll just see here it's broken out. So program management roles, broken out into these 5 different categories. So participation in Bonner sponsored activities. These are things like the Fall Directors Meeting, the Summer Leadership Institute, Bonner Foundation staff coming to your campus and doing a campus visit, those kinds of things. Then there's the administrative and financial piece, particularly for Bonner Scholar Program, so submitting and doing all of that reporting. There's the campus-wide collaboration, so working with other offices. Maybe it's your Greek life, maybe it's athletics, maybe it's your academic offices, so working with other people on campus and offices on campus to support this work. And then direct service placements and capacity building projects. So doing that work in the community, supporting students to do this work in the community, continuing to, build those relationships. And then the education, training, and reflection piece. So the meetings, the retreats, conferences, all of that kind of good stuff. So these are the different kind of big 5 categories of managing a program, the different pieces of it. So I would encourage you to go into this handbook and look through all of these different bullets, because I think it's really helpful to see each little bullet of what to a specificity, like what all is encompassed in running a Bonner program. But we won't read all those bullets today, but I would encourage you to go and do that. Okay, so this slide just shows top level Bonner director, and then we have one for Bonner coordinator. So typically the Bonner director, their role is to do the overseeing of the operations for the entire center and the entire Bonner program. So really overseeing top level stuff of the operations, right? Not necessarily the nitty gritty. They're also serving as the key advocate and leader for community and civic engagement on campus. So your Bonner director is out there, talking to your senior staff, talking to other people on campus, in the community, and advocating for this work, so that this work is a priority, and that we should be continuing to support this work. So they're really that key advocate on campus. They're also supervising and supporting the other staff, such as like the Bonner coordinator, and if you have other center staff. So they're that supervisor for all the other staff in your center. And then often playing a central role in promoting the academic connections as well. So really making those academic pathways happen. So that's kind of big picture, the role of the Bonner director. And then Bonner coordinator, So the Bonner coordinator's role, they're doing more of designing and facilitating and assessing the education, structure, and programming for the Bonner program. So they're probably more hands-in to the Bonner program itself and the programming of it, the structure. It's also more of the student-facing role, so working more with the students one-on-one, providing that mentoring piece and supporting Bonner students. They're also the one doing the majority of monitoring, like performance, completion of hours, expectations, holding students accountable, having those conversations to make sure like the work is getting done, people are being held accountable, and then managing all components of things like recruitment and selection, as well as sites and positions. So I'm also gonna ask Amber to share a little bit about her experience as the Bonner coordinator and how she kind of sees her role play out. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the metaphor, which I know is commonly used among higher ed folks, of thinking about the dance floor, the stairs, and the balcony is really helpful for me when thinking about the coordinator. We are somebody who is on the dance floor all the time, but is often kind of pulled up to the stairs because at many campuses, Bonners are seen as the most engaged, the most committed students. And so that means often that your directors of your center, your student affairs vice president, academic affairs staff even, are gonna want to know kind of what's going on among your students. And so it requires that kind of dual hat of wearing, of, you know, being able to function within students and make students feel comfortable and safe and have belonging, while also being able to share that feedback authentically to folks above you. I thought it was a little funny in the intro when Liz mentioned, or a couple slides ago when Liz mentioned, you know, a lot of counseling is required, and like, I don't have a counseling background. I feel really fortunate that Stetson has a mental health counseling program, and I decided to pursue that while I was in AmeriCorps Vista. And so that training has prepared me really well for working with our Bonners, because our counseling staffs on our campuses are so limited. I know not every campus offers free counseling services to students. And so it's also the case, though, that many of the interactions and experiences they have within Bonner, like compassion fatigue that they feel with their community partners, everyone is experiencing vicarious trauma right now, just, you know, paying attention to what's going on in the world. And so it really requires us to be that additional level of support for them and help them process these experiences that they're having. And so I highly encourage anybody, if you have the opportunity to work with any of the psych or counseling staff on your campus, I think that can be really helpful, or talking to community leaders. But I find that my role as the Bonner coordinator is really to be a connector of people. You know, connecting students to new sites, connecting sites to each other, and connecting faculty to our sites is really that role that I take on by being in this position.
Absolutely. Thanks, Amber. Yeah, I said that about the counseling piece, knowing that you have a counseling background too, so I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, and I'll also say that to me, the mentorship piece here really jumps out, because I felt that was one of the most rewarding parts of being the Bonner coordinator or being a Bonner staff member. It was also the most challenging at times, was working with students really closely, and everything that comes with that, but also hands down the most rewarding piece of it, or one of the most rewarding pieces of it. I still have very close relationships with many of the students that I was their Bonner coordinator, and I'm still close with my Bonner coordinators from the past. So yeah, so we'll just say that.
Something I think Liz and I have definitely shared that some of you may have experienced, and that definitely your senior interns may experience if they continue to pass through the Bonner pipeline, and something that I value so much about time to talk about the pipeline during our Summer Leadership Institute, during Congress and Fall Directors, is what it's like to be a student and then transition into this position. So we have a lot of young, you know, or student leaders who will go and then be a Bonner coordinator at another school. And so even if you didn't have those direct personal relationships, sometimes it can feel uncomfortable going from being just a couple months out of being a student and now being in charge of them and navigating those boundaries can be difficult. So, you know, we have quite a bit of young coordinators in the network, and we could definitely kind of convene more often to talk about what that's like, because I know that's something I've struggled with a lot in the past couple of years.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a great point. I love that Amber's plugging the Bonner pipeline. And like Jennifer, I can't see you right now, but I know you're on this call from Allegheny. She's also an example of this. Bonner alum from Guilford, and now is the Bonner coordinator at Allegheny. So not her undergrad institution, but another Bonner school. So it is fairly common to see that Bonner alums becoming Bonner staff, sometimes even right after undergrad. Okay, I won't put you on the spot to say anything, Jennifer. Maybe at the end. All right, so we'll keep moving on. So a year at a glance. I'm just gonna pull up all the slides. Okay, so I won't go cover all of this, but this is just to give you an idea of what it looks like at a year, kind of what are all the activities, meetings, the things that are happening in a year from the kind of the staff lens of it. So in the fall, where we are now, you're thinking about orientation. Maybe you're in orientation. I know Amber at Stetson, they're doing their orientation right now. So maybe you have yours in a couple weeks, or you're thinking about a Bonner program. So thinking about what it would be like to plan an orientation. So that's happening in the fall. So that's really a big piece, important, particularly for those new Bonners, to get a sense of your Bonner community, your community partners, your program, your institution, what it's going to be like to be a Bonner. So they're doing that at the outset, setting those expectations. Then also into the fall, doing things like placing first years with a community partner site, maybe some upper class Bonners who needed to switch a placement for whatever reason. So you're getting people set for their placements for the year. And then in the fall, we have our two of our big meetings. So Bonner Congress, which is for target towards students. So representatives, student representatives from campuses will attend that meeting. And then there's the fall directors and new directors and coordinators meeting. So this fall, those things will look different. Pretty sure all of those will be online of some version. So they'll look different, but typically those are in-person meetings. For Bonner Congress, it's hosted at a different Bonner school every year. Stetson actually hosted a couple years ago the Bonner Congress Conference. And then for the fall directors and coordinators meeting, for the past few years, we've been going to the Claggett Center, which is in Maryland. So it's a time for either students or staff to come together. A big source of community, at least I know that's how those meetings feel to me, is being around other Bonner staff and getting to like be in community with one another, but also getting to engage in workshops and trainings and hear speakers, and a great professional development opportunity as well.
I also just wanted to shout out Jennifer for hosting 2 SLIs in a row, and to Arlette for hosting what I thought was one of the most fun SLIs that's ever been in New York City. And also Wagner's is a beautiful campus. So that's one of the best parts about the Bonner meetings. And if your campus can afford to have you go, is like, the networking in the community is amazing, but you also get to see other Bonner schools. Yeah. It's really special. And it's not like a hotel, like a lot of conferences.
Yeah. Absolutely. The Bonner meetings are, to me, one of the best parts. Like they're also really fun. And yeah, we've got a lot of people on this call who are engaged in that and helped host. So a lot of veterans here. So into the winter, might be doing something like a mid-year retreat. So thinking about reflecting on the past year of the fall and then thinking forward about visioning for the next semester. Also, it's a good time to do site visits and check-ins with, particularly with community partners, since students are either thinking about finals or they're, wrapping up for the year. During that winter time, it can be good to call, or if we were in person visits, or maybe you will be in person, I don't know. But to do check-ins, evaluate how the fall has gone, and then see what you need to do to adjust potentially for the spring. You're also ongoing work with like faculty training and engagement, those academic links, semester placements if students need to adjust for the spring, and then starting to already think about the summer. Placements, recruitment for like summer of service, if you do that on your campus, which is essentially like summer internships. And then in the spring, so it says first year trip and second year exchange cornerstones. Those don't have to happen in the spring. Those are pretty flexible. They can happen whenever makes sense for your program. I know at Center, our first year trip was always kind of at least at the end of the spring, beginning of summer. Our second year exchange had been in the fall, had been in the spring. That moved around, but essentially at some point in the school year, you want to do those cornerstone events. And then spring, I always felt like spring was really characterized a lot by recruitment and selection. And I felt like I was doing a lot of interviews, a lot of reading applications for new Bonners. Maybe if you have new staff, either in your center or like on campus that you're involved in, some of those recruitment and selection of new staff. But really for Bonner, you're identifying who's going to be that next class of Bonners. And you potentially are going to have some of your student leaders involved in that process as well. And then you may also be doing some site check-ins and visits with partners, continuing to do those academic connections, and thinking about maybe capstones and development of minors and pathways. So continuing that work through the spring, and then in the summer, finalizing summer placements and getting things all ready to go for the work that students will do in the summer. Let me see if I can, sorry. Sorry, I was trying to move my little box so I could see my summer, but we're gonna do our best to read this. I don't know, my little thing. So I think that says summer, probably end of the year, like senior presentations of learning, and also capstones. So you're going to do like those culminating events, right? So end of the year, students are presenting about the work that they've done through the semester or the year through either a capstone presentation, or a senior presentation of learning, which would be a senior reflecting on their whole 4 years. As well as potentially attending the Summer Leadership Institute, which is another one of our gatherings. And this one happens in the summer, and that's for everybody. It's students attend, staff attend, faculty attend, other administrators. It's our largest gathering. Sometimes around like 450 or so people. We have national partners, other partners attend. So, and that again is hosted on a different campus every year. And then in the summer, you're also managing the student placements for their summer placements, and also any kind of evaluation and planning that you do at the end of a year. So reflecting on the whole year. And then, so one of those things would be the annual report to the Bonner Foundation that we ask programs to do. So that is a year at a glance of kind of what it looks like. I guess I haven't said this before, but like if anyone has any questions at any point, please feel free to like unmute and say it. I won't be able to see if there's a chat or anything happening, but if you have a question, please just ask it at any point. Okay, well, I guess actually, let's see if there's any questions at that point before we move on to student leadership roles. No? Okay, cool, we'll move on. So as I said at the beginning, students can play a really important role in being an extension of your staff. So even if you're not a small team, I think having a really robust student leadership structure is important, but particularly if you are a small team, students can play a really important role. I know I felt that way at Center. We just had the director and me, the coordinator, and so we did really rely on our students to be an extension of our staff, to engage in the recruitment and selection process with us, to help hold their peers accountable, to help manage BWebbers, right? Doing some of those administrative things so that we could continue to do, other kinds of work. So we're going to talk about what some of those student leadership roles could be. So One of that is a senior intern. So these are typically 1 to 4 really motivated students, typically a rising senior or junior, who really play that program management role, help to really manage the program. It's an administrative, kind of an administrative role. And typically it's students who have a really strong understanding of the program and how to mobilize their peers. And you may want to start to be thinking about, okay, who's going to be a senior intern, preparing students in their even sophomore or junior year to play that role, to take on a senior leadership kind of role, and encouraging them, like, yes, you could be that. You can be a senior intern. You can play those roles. And some of the big aspects of what senior interns do is helping to coordinate and manage your Bonner leadership team, your BLT. So your senior intern is going to be managing those other students who are leaders in your program. They're organizing and leading meetings and trainings. So they're getting up in front of all your other Bonners and leading the meetings, helping to manage other service sites and working with the community partners, also helping with accountability and be Webbers. So those are kind of top level, some of the work that senior interns do. They're also engaging in trainings like the Summer Leadership Institute, maybe the Bonner Congress Conference. So they're getting that additional training from the foundation and from the network, from other Bonner programs, to help them be their best in these roles, in these leadership roles. Let's see.
I did just want to mention that some schools don't have senior interns who are Bonners. I think the University of Tampa is a great model for that, where it's an external student employment position, where a non-Bonner student takes on that role of kind of coordinating and running Bonner, which is a really interesting perspective. And that's something that we've been thinking about at Stetson, is having potentially 2 senior interns who are Bonners and then a third one who it's not, because that outside perspective can really give you a fresh take and give you some new ideas for leading.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I would say maybe it's not super common, but it's interesting, like, to explore, to explore that model of having maybe a fresh set of eyes. And I mean, I think from my own experience as a senior intern and working with senior interns, I think it can be really important for students to see what it's like to run a program, to see kind of the staff side of things, of what goes into it. Obviously, they're not seeing everything for privacy and other reasons, right? But I think it can be really important for them to get a sense of what it takes to run a program, and then to communicate that to their peers, right? And lead and show their example of, like, oh, our Bonner coordinator and director, they actually have all of this other stuff going on that you all aren't seeing. So let's, really pay attention in this meeting today, right? And, like, set a good example. Really trying to be a leader for their fellow students, their fellow Bonners. So in terms of training, the kind of trainings that senior interns, like, receive and need. So they're attending the national meetings, like I said, and then other online connections. And then they really should be getting some intensive training in these kind of core areas, because this is the kind of work that they'll be doing. So program management, right? How to run and manage the Bonner program, peer leadership, how to facilitate workshops. So making sure that they have fairly good facilitation skills. They know how to, run a room and manage it. Because they'll be leading meetings, and then that they know how to be pretty organized, and the organization skills. And then we have actually a whole handbook. It's called the Bonner Intern Handbook. I believe this is also on the Bonner Learning Community, that goes really into depth about how to be a senior intern, what trainings are needed, some tools, and so it's really helpful. That you can send the PDF to your students and have them look through it, or you could, have a whole meeting about it and go through it together and work through it. So, but it's a really useful resource that we have. So I'd encourage you to look at that. So this is just pointing you to the Wiki, where you have more information on Bonner student interns. So that is. Okay, so the next part of student leadership is the Bonner Leadership Team, or BLT as we refer to. So who these are typically a group of students, a group of student leaders who help to run and manage the Bonner program and campus-wide engagement. So it's less of that administrative role, right? So if you're thinking of a senior intern as like an extension of your staff, doing kind of the administrative work, the Bonner Leadership Team is doing more of like working with other groups on campus, and they might be running meetings as well, and then really providing, I think, to me, providing a lot of that student voice piece, and making sure that their fellow Bonners and their peers' voices are being represented in the leadership of the program. And so really BLTs can look very, very different depending on the campus. There are tons of ways to structure Bonner leadership teams. And it's very common for programs to go through iterations of it, where you have one structure for a couple years that's working, and then you realize that that's not working as well, so you adjust it and you have a different structure. And that's very normal, very common. I know when I was a staff member in the role, I thought a little like something's going wrong because we want to switch up our BLT structure so often, but I actually think the opposite now, where I think it actually shows that students' voices are being represented and taken into account, and we're reacting to that, so we change up the structure. So we're really listening to students and what they need and what their skills are, what they want to bring to the table, what they think are priorities at that time that should be reflected in leadership. What they do, almost everything. You can be really creative with what kind of roles they have, and getting training as well from the national meetings like Bonner Congress and Summer Leadership Institute. And then I think, Amber, did you want to say something about BLTs, or was it on the next slide?
I just wanted to add, it sounds like incredibly stressful to think about changing your student leadership structure every year, and it is. But I will say, just like Liz said, that's kind of the point that I've gotten to, and this is my 3rd year as a coordinator and my 5th year on staff with our center. I've just kind of thrown my hands up and accepted that, like, that's the roller coaster of having a student-led program. So within our program, we're very open to letting students come to me and our senior interns. We usually ask that they do it in February or March if they have ideas for new positions that the program would benefit from. We also have program-wide events that happen through the year that we call think tanks, where students of the program are invited to come and just share their thoughts and their feedback on a topic. And so we get a lot of ideas for ways the program needs to grow from those conversations too. And especially this year, I'm trying really hard to take a step back and let my senior interns lead and fail and not be too kind of in the weeds with everything, because they're going to make mistakes and they have to work through those interpersonal conflicts themselves. And a lot of that will give them ideas for the ways that they might want their lead team to look in the future if ever they're a senior intern or if they decide to apply for next year. I did mention in the chat that I would be sending out our contract and our list of position descriptions. So I'm going to email those to Richita, and she's going to put them up in the Bonner Learning community so all of you can access them.
Awesome. Thanks, Amber. And thanks for sharing those. So, and I'll just say too, because you mentioned this a bit, about letting students fail, letting your student interns fail and learn from those experiences. That's something I really struggled with as a staff member, and kind of where to toe that line between jumping in and kind of fixing stuff when it seems like it's going awry, versus letting students go through the experience of making those mistakes and having some failures and learning from them, because that is a part of leadership, right? Is learning through your mistakes. Just know you're not alone if you struggle in that. I struggled with that. But here are some different examples of, we're referring to like Bonner leadership team structure. It's how you can structure these students, the teams of students. So there's class-based roles, so having representatives from each class. So you have, say, 2 representatives from the 1st year class, 2nd year class, 3rd year, and 4th year. And they're, that the representation and the student voice for that cohort of students. And then maybe those class reps take on a certain project. So your first years are taking on helping to organize your first year trip. Your second years are taking on helping to manage sophomore exchange, et cetera, et cetera. It's a class-based structure. There's also a chair-based roles structure. So having more activity-based. So you have someone who's in charge of social media. They're your social media chair. Your BWeber's chair, someone who does BWeber's and the accountability piece. Community partnerships chair, someone who's in charge of community partnerships, right? So more activity-based and having individual students in charge of these different activities. There's committee-based structure, which is a little bit similar to chair-based, except it's a group of students working on one committee, one topic. So say you have a Bonner Love committee. So Bonner Love being like your community building committee, right? Doing planning activities, meetings that help to foster Bonner Love in your program. And then you have maybe one of those students who's the leader or the chair of that committee, of your Bonner Love committee. So could also have like a judiciary committee, an assessment committee, a community fund committee. And so you get to decide as your program and as your students, kind of what are your needs in your program? What committees would you want to have represented in your program? Maybe it's not assessment for you, but it's some other thing. And I see Elaine is raising her hand. Yes, Elaine.
And so you might have been going here anyway, but how do you choose or decide on either the committee focus areas or the role, how do we focus on those clusters?
Yeah, so like which structure to pick or which students?
No, not the structure, the content of so how do you choose like judicial disciplinary or assessment or community partnerships? How do you decide on how many committees, on what they're going to work on?
So I would love to jump in just because we have a traditional sort of the chair's role. As you guys will see in our job descriptions, our lead team is made of 10 students, 5 what we call class-based leaders who lead the different classes, 4 issue area leaders, and then 1 student who's going to do alumni and marketing for recruitment. And so then this year, historically, we've always had a spring retreat planning committee for our program that we open up to every student. And we say, anybody who wants to join can join. We're going to have at least 1 member of lead team and 1 senior intern on it, and anybody can help shape that. And it has completely revitalized what that spring programming looks like, because students love that they get to like dip their toes into leadership without the full responsibility of being in a role. And so this year we said, okay, that's worked really well for like 2 years. So this year we're going to expand it out, and we're going to ask our lead team and ask students what ideas they have for committees. And so we came up with a couple. So knowing that we have this marketing and recruitment student, we're like, okay, let's make an outreach committee. We've always had a problem with our Bonner program being well known on campus. So let's make a committee of students whose job it is to pump Bonner through campus. But that was one of our ideas. Our students came up with ideas for a wellness committee. So to make sure that everybody is focusing on self-care and providing education about self-care and partnering with our wellness and rec department within student affairs. They also came up with an idea for a diversity and equity committee, not that would provide programming, but I really love this idea, who would review our values and our kind of policies within Bonner and tell us when we're not following our values. And so I'm really excited about the opportunity for that. And then the last one was also, oh my goodness, wellness, a sustainability committee. So especially being that we are in the state of Florida, we have a lot of natural wildlife around us, and we have been trying very hard over the years to go zero waste within our program for all of our events. And so that's a group of students from our environmental issue area who say, we want to be the champions and remind people all the time that we need to be thinking zero waste as much as possible. So we let our students decide. Our rules this year, as you guys will see in their contract, is that each lead team member has to chair or co-chair a committee. And then from there, we're inviting any member of the program to join.
Yeah, thanks, Amber. That was excellent. Yeah, so it could be from students, hearing what students think the committees and the needs are. It could be, particularly if you're starting out, you may just need to make some some decisions on what those needs are. So if you're starting out thinking like, okay, maybe like an outreach committee or someone who's working with other campus partners, maybe the community partner committee, because you need to build up those community partner relationships. But really it's up to the programs, either the staff, the students. I think it is really important to have that student voice in there, whether they get to decide or make recommendations on what those should be. And as we said before, it's okay if it changes. It probably will change over time because the program will change and evolve, and the needs will change, priorities will change. So it's really okay for these structures to change. In my time at Center, I think we've had every single one of these four different models at some point in the, I don't even know, 5-6 years that like I have been either a student in the program or running the program. We've had every single different type. So, and again, I think that is more than okay. Awesome. So, and then the last one I'll just touch on here is the family-based role. So that is where you're going to have groups of students that are like, you break up your program into groups. And so it could either be like a mix of years. So you have first years and sophomores, juniors and seniors, or it could be a family based on the cohort. So you have your first year cohort, your second year, third year, fourth year, and then you have like a parent or a leader who's in charge of that group. So if they're in charge of the first years, making sure that they're transitioning well, right? Or you have some leaders in charge of the seniors, making sure they're transitioning out of the program well, and maybe organizing specific meetings for them to come together and talk about whatever their needs are. Or if it's the mix group, so then you have a mix of class years in there. And then, so there's pros and cons to both ways, right? It could either be your cohort and you're building cohort community if you just have, that group of students together. But the pro of having a mix is that then you get to know other class years. So it's great for first years to get to interact with seniors. There's a lot of benefit to that. So again, it's really up to whatever you feel like the needs of your program are and how you'd want to structure something like that. But here are just some of the examples of how you can structure a BLT. Okay, we will, and all these slides again are like going to be on the Bonner Learning Community or already are, so you can go back and reference them and stuff. What I thought your question was going to be, Elena, was how maybe to select the students. So who should be in these leadership roles, what kind of students, and what does that process look like? Again, it's up to you all kind of what's going to work best for you, but here's some ideas on what the selection process can look like. Typically it's happening in early spring. So you're doing the recruitment and selection in early spring to prepare for that next fall of who's going to be your leadership team for the fall. You can have a written application and an interview. So students, you write an application, you put together, we have models of that on the Bonner Wiki of examples of applications for BLT. And so then, you read through those, you and your coordinator or whoever, or your current BLT helps read through those and then engage in interviews to see who might be the best fit based on, the diversity of the students in leadership roles or the skills that they're going to be bringing to the table, right? You want to be thoughtful about those aspects too. There's also, if you don't go the application process, then you could be, the selection process could be like a voting. So having the students in the program vote on who they want to be the leaders of their program. Or it could be some sort of internal appointment. So especially I think that could be good if you're starting out, that you just make some decisions on who you see potential in that could be a good leader to help get you off the ground and get you started. So it might just be you sit down with some strong students and say, hey, I want you to be the senior intern of the program. I want you to be, a BLT member of the program to get you going, right? To get you off the ground. And then you could implement some of these other models as you kind of build your structure out. Or it could be some sort of combination of these, of voting, internal appointment, et cetera. So those are some different ways of selecting BLTs.
I just wanted to share, especially if any of you all have been participating in, I think it's our Tuesday afternoon foundation calls, Crystal Woolston from Montclair State, they use a really great model that's really solid for having like a nomination and an elections process, whereas my students, like elections are not the culture of our Bonner program, and I've asked them multiple times, like, should we incorporate a kind of input session or have people do speeches? And my students year over year are like, absolutely not, we don't want that. So, but if you are interested in doing that, Crystal is somebody who, I think her model is really great.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a good point. Like a lot of times it reflects the culture of your program, your institution, right? Are you a more formal, you want to do an application, an interview, all of that, or is your campus more of a consensus based, right? Let's vote, let's decide who we want to be our leaders. So it could reflect your program or your institution as well. And here's beautiful Center Bonner leadership team from this past year. Nice little photo there. Okay, I'm acknowledging the time that we're at 11:10, so I might start to go a little bit quicker through some slides. So training, this is just showing the kinds of training that BLT members should be getting, some orientation. They want to do some strengths, style, so they know the different strengths of their team building, because they want to do a lot of that in their program, facilitation, they may be facilitating meetings as well, so they want some of those skills, meeting design, holding their peers accountable. So this is all the kind of training that would be good for our Bonner leadership team students to be receiving. And then this slide just shows you where to get more information on Bonner leadership teams on the Bonner Wiki, which is some of those campus examples of what I said, for the examples of applications. You can find them as there. Okay, Bonner Congress, I will go pretty quickly through Bonner Congress, particularly because it will look very different this year, and who knows, for future years as well, because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So we typically have that in-person meeting, as I said before, and you would have 2 students as representatives from your leadership team, your student leadership team, attend this meeting. So they are representing your program, and they're would engage in this meeting to get additional training and ideas that they would then bring back to your program. Lots of ways you could pick those students as well. It could be same idea, appointment, you could vote, lots of ways of picking students. I will say with Bonner Congress, the goals and the purpose of Bonner Congress has really changed over the years. There used to be something called like the big idea, where students would come with this big idea and then get all this feedback on it and then bring it back to their campus to implement that big idea. Now Bonner Congress is serving a bit more of just like as a leadership development conference where students come and get a lot of additional training that they can then bring back to their campus. So it has changed a bit over the years, but it's another role within your Bonner leadership team that we have some structure for. And then this is, meetings that they have. So attending the Fall Bonner Congress, Summer Leadership Institute, maybe engaging with other schools, through networking opportunities. And then this is a screenshot of actually the Stetson Bonner Congress agenda. So you can get a little glance of like what that meeting would look like. They're doing all group sessions, some strategic tracks, they're doing workshop blocks. So they're getting all this great information and training that then they bring back to your program. So we won't spend too much time on that, on Bonner Congress, because we will not be doing an in-person Bonner Congress this year. So it's just going to look different. But eventually we'll get to do that again, hopefully. Okay, this just shows Bonner Wiki, where you can get more information on Congress. Okay, so now we're going to move into some of the examples. So we're going to show you examples of structures of campus-wide centers for civic engagement and some org charts. So startup. So this is where many of you are, right? So in the startup phase, Bonner program staff are probably wearing multiple hats, doing a lot of different things. You may want to think about starting with 5 to 10 students. You may have first years, but then also some upperclassmen who could play some of those leadership roles at the beginning. And then you're adding students each class year. You're going to add, more and more until whatever size you feel like might be best for your program. And then linking with campus-wide service programs for events and projects. So trying to get the program out there by like connecting with the other groups on campus who are doing this work already. What this looks like could be Bonner Program Director who's managing the program, and then you have the leaders, the Bonner leaders, 5 to 10 who are serving in some different leadership roles, and then across you've got connecting with other campus staff and faculty, and then maybe like site project leaders on different like projects within the community or with community partner sites. So you have some leaders who are managing that work. And then an immediate size center. So you have a center director who's now overseeing the center and overseeing the Bonner program. And then on this side, you've got then Bonner program director, senior interns, leadership team, Congress reps. So you're building out that student leadership a bit more. And then on the other side, similar campus faculty and staff, maybe some Vistas who are working in your center, and again, maybe some site and project leaders. So that's kind of medium, intermediate size. And then an established center might look like you have your center director who's overseeing the center and the Bonner program. Then you have Bonner program director and coordinator, senior interns, all of those leadership roles. Maybe you're also managing some sort of community service federal work study program. Maybe that's already happening in your center too. And then on the other side, you've got campus, faculty and staff, maybe some service learning that's happening out of your center, Vistas that you're managing out of your center, site project leaders that's happening out of your center, and then maybe other student service clubs and organizations, right? So the one-time service projects, your MLK Day of Service, if you have something like that on your campus, Greek life, athletics, other people who are engaging in any kind of like service community engagement on campus, all of this is happening in your center. So that's kind of like big, robust center. Okay. Then.
So Sierra has a quick question about the difference between Bonner lead team and Congress reps. So Sierra, normally and historically in the network, Congress rep has been a position on your lead team, but their position is usually very different. And a lot of schools either don't recruit a Congress rep specifically, or like Liz mentioned, you know, our program's 15 years old. So we previously had Congress reps who would go to SLI and come up with their big idea for the year. We've stepped away from that now. And now we as a staff and as a lead team decide what the big initiative is. And then we ask one of those positions that's already on lead team saying like, okay, this is your project and you're going to go to Bonner Congress as our Congress rep. So we take a little bit of a different approach, but I hope that helps. Lots of schools treat Congress reps differently though.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a good question. I do think it could be a good idea, particularly starting out, to have your Bonner Congress reps as a part of your Bonner leadership team. I think that could be really helpful. Yeah. Okay, awesome. All right, this slide just shows you where you can get some more information on campus-wide centers on the Bonner Wiki. Love our Bonner Wiki. Okay, and then, so these are going to be examples of centers actually in the Bonner network. So real examples, real programs and real centers in the Bonner network and what those look like. So this is Montclair State University's center, their structure. So at the beginning, when we asked you to map your center, this is kind of what the map of Montclair State's center looks like. So they have a center director, and then they have a center assistant director, that's Crystal Woolston that Amber just referenced. And then they have, coming out of that, on the right-hand side, they have something that's called Scholar in Residence. They have a service learning coordinator, and then I think that's his volunteer coordinator. I can't quite see that. And then MSU students on that side. And then on the other side, they have site coordinators. Individuals who are coordinating individual sites. And then you have a project coordinator, and then they have AmeriCorps members. So it's a pretty decent size, kind of medium level center that they have. And then this is Sienna's center, so a little bit bigger here. They have, I really need this thing to move because I can't see everything. But they have a director of programs.
Move the participants window, you can move it up.
Well, I tried that, but then see it moves on me because I can't see my mouse. It's fine. It's fine. So they have a director of programs, and then underneath the director of programs, they have the assistant director of their Bonner program, and also their global service internship. And then under that, they've got their Bonner student leadership team. And then they have their assistant director of a quality assurance and summer scholars program. And under that, that's where they have their Vista, who's Vista fellow who does their community policy institute. So that's the kind of project they work on. And then they have an assistant director for postgrad programs, Vista, and then Vista leaders under that. And then over here on the side, they have a coordinator for community partnerships and communications. They have a coordinator for their next consulting program. And they also have like an office assistant. And then the other side, not that I can see it.
So you guys will get to meet Ruth, who is the Director of Academic Integration, and Ruth is actually a faculty member. So Sienna's program and their entire center is under Academic Affairs, which I think it seems like it's 50-50 within the Bonner Network, whether we're housed under Student Affairs or Academic Affairs. But Ruth is a faculty member who teaches service learning, and so she and their assistant director oversee all of their community engaged teaching and learning. And their campus doesn't have a faculty center for teaching and learning, so it runs through their center called ACE, Academic Community Engagement. Something that's really cool about Sienna, it looks like a lot of positions and it looks like a lot and like a big structure, even though it's the mid-size. But from my conversations with them, they've done a lot of work in their strategic planning to pare down, you know, what are our highest impact programs, what are our biggest areas of focus, and those are the programs that they oversee. I know that's something that we struggle with in our center at Stetson, is that I feel like a lot of our programs are just kind of like a junk drawer, like they don't necessarily align with each other and they're just things we've had over the years. But Sienna's really, to me, is a model for ways to do the digging and see like, okay, what are we known for? What are we really good at? And then let's put resources towards those things. And that's why they have those three main assistant directors.
Excellent. That was perfect, Amber. I'm going to say nothing else because that was great. Awesome. Okay. And then this last one we'll show you here is from the University of Richmond. It is one of the largest centers in the Bonner network. It was the largest for a long time, but now I believe Brown's is larger, but it is the largest in terms of like Bonner programs that have been around for a long time, and still one of the largest. I think it's 20-something staff, I believe, within their center. So I'm not going to go through all of these little positions, but you can see that they have someone who's overseeing the whole thing, right? A center director, and then kind of a couple different various director level positions that are then overseeing other aspects where you have associate director level positions, and then administrative roles. And then on the right-hand side, you can see a lot of the Bonner stuff happening. So an assistant director for student engagement and the Bonner Scholar Program, a manager for student engagement and Bonner Program, and then their student leadership team. Yeah, we won't go into all of it, but you can just see the types and varieties of positions at a really robust program. And I think Richmond does a really good job of managing their whole center and their program for all the different kinds of moving pieces that they do have. So I think that might be, yeah, our last slide. Okay, great. And we've got a little less than 10 minutes. Okay, so I was going to do a breakout room, but I don't think we'll have time. So I think we'll just maybe share as a group together. So final sharing. How are you feeling right now? What is your reaction to all of this information? Do you feel overwhelmed? Do you feel great, ready to go? And then what support do you need from the foundation or other Bonner programs to successfully navigate this work? And then there's also this last one, what infrastructure must you build? So as you've heard all of this information today, what infrastructure do you think that you would want to try and build hearing all of this. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and put these questions in the chat, and then have some people share if you don't mind. Chat. Okay, there's that one. And so feel free to share answering like any three of those questions. How are you
Yeah,
feeling?
maybe some of you already have been running the Bonner program. You could share your insights, and then we can have schools, representative from new schools.
Okay, I'll break the ice.
Thanks, Arlette.
Well, I'm going under major restructuring. So I'm going from a mid-sized center to a no center, working under academic affairs and overseeing and facilitating the Bonner program. So for me, first of all, it's the first time actually facilitating the Bonner program. I've overseen it, but not done the whole components of it. So for me, it's important to build a very robust student leadership team, because there's no one else, just me. So I'm going to need the help of the BLT and the senior interns, and have a very synchronized and harmonious student body that's working towards the same goal. Mm-hmm. Because we don't have the same structures that we used to. The other piece of this also is that we didn't recruit an incoming year. So we're working with only 3 cohorts, sophomores, juniors, and seniors, which also changes the dynamics of the entire program, because a lot of the mentorship roles and things like that, let's say juniors would do with freshmen, are not going to be there. It's a much smaller group, and people who know each other and have already preconceptions of how the program should be. So I have to be able to help them navigate through the changes themselves. Like your Bonner program has changed completely. So what are the new expectations? Setting those new expectations based on this new norm and reality, it's going to be really hard. But I think we can do it with a very unified student leadership team. That's my goal.
Yeah, thanks for sharing all of that. Yeah, transition can be very, very, very difficult for the staff, for students. It can sometimes be an opportunity, so hopefully people can see it that way as well, to build, to kind of build new. So hopefully good things come out of that. Yeah, leaning on your students can be really important there. Yeah, thanks, Arlette.
I think one of the takeaways, so first of all, I love like conferences like this because it's exciting, and it's just like the possibility of like what we could look like at our best. But I think one of the things that I'm reminded of is to invest just as much into the Bonner leadership team as we are into Bonners in general. And I think that, I shouldn't just assume that like our senior intern knows how to facilitate or feels like they have a good sense of organizational, so creating those professional development opportunities for everyone on that staff structure. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head, because to be able to hand over some of these kind of administrative and staff aspects for students to be an extension of your staff, they have to be trained well enough to do that, right? So it does take some effort and energy to build up your student leadership team to get them to that place. But I think once you build some infrastructure and structures to make that happen, and then happen consistently, then I think it becomes easier to then now like, okay, I can can have students take that on. The leadership team can take that on. But definitely the training piece is really key. Yeah, it's a really good point. Maybe we have time for one more person wants to share.
I'll share. I'm gonna mirror Arlette and what she talks about, really relying on her BLT team. There's only 2 of us. I'm the only full-time Bonner person, and then Jesse's like part-time because she also directs our whole civic engagement center. So we rely on our BLT team extensively to do that, and we kind of have a chair system. So we have class chairs that run the class meetings with kind of our input and mentoring on those, and our leadership team meetings. Actually, Jesse and I do in that professional development and training the leaders to take on their roles. So what we can do to help them be successful in the roles that they have. But I also like the way that each school kind of sets things up differently. So I'm always looking for maybe a better way, or like this year we have our first alumni ambassador for the first time going to be on our team. So we're super excited about that. But and it's important, I think, that we keep ourselves flexible. And it's like, if we have a need in our program, that we can create a new position for someone. I've had somebody on the BLT team as like special projects because like last year we reviewed our journal entries and our reflection, and so I had somebody who kind of did that for a year and kind of helped us do that. But it's really nice to hear what other schools are doing, and so like during SLI and during the directors meeting and things like that, figuring out what other people are doing, and then you can like, oh, that's a great idea. I want to do that at our school too. So
Absolutely. Thanks, Val. Yeah, I think the community, the Bonner community, is one of the best assets of this group and of this network, is that you can hear from each other, support one another. And it is I don't know, it's the Bonner way, I guess. Like, it's just very much part of the ethic of how we do this work, is that we share and support each other. So it's a special little community if you haven't picked up on that yet, as you've just heard from veterans here as well. All right, well that's our time. I want to thank you all so much for joining us today to hear about program management and staffing. If this was helpful, feel free, if you don't have my email, we'll get it out to you. I'll put it in the chat. Feel free to follow up, ask me questions. I'm sure Amber probably feels the same. So also shout out to Amber. Thank you so much for joining this session, helping me lead today. But appreciate all of you all and your time, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks.